Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this side event on empowering youth engagement in climate action, solutions, and policy addressing global challenges. I really appreciate you all being here today. My name is Diane Husick, and I serve as the Dean of Scholarship, Research, and Creative Endeavors and the Program Director for the Environmental Programs at Moravian University, which is in the United States. I'm also a member of the Ringo Steering Committee and on 2 of the current Technology Executive Mechanism activity groups. I'm going to begin with a few remarks to set the stage for this session, and then we have a panel of students that's expanded down to the audience here because we don't have enough seats up here. And a bit later, then we're going to have our guest speaker, Dr. Carol O'Donnell from the Smithsonian Institution. Amidst the ever-changing and increasingly complex challenges facing the planet and humanity, there is a growing need to educate the next generation of environmental stewards and leaders who are global citizens with sustainability mindsets. Educational institutions, so universities, colleges, and organizations such as the Smithsonian Institution that does broad-based outreach to the public through museums, exhibits, and other types of programming, have a key role in this, and a major responsibility in this effort. Such institutions should also be modeling for society good sustainability practices and lowering carbon emissions. Universities have come a long way in this developing their sustainability programs, whether that's in the curriculum or in their campus operations. Many research universities are also highly focused on research and technology to help address some of these global environmental challenges. These are noteworthy efforts, but do they give the students what they need and want, the skills to solve the problems and create resilient communities, either locally or beyond? Are institutions recognizing the degree of climate grief or eco-anxiety among our youth? Are the topics of climate change and sustainability or sustainable development taught across the curriculum? I would argue that not necessarily, but we're getting better. And I was thrilled to hear today about Indiana University in the United States that is including sustainability as a requirement throughout their general education. So I'm going to cite a couple examples, places where we could do better, and then we're going to hear from students who are doing some really pretty cool stuff to show you how we move education into action. So for instance, there's clear evidence linking climate change to a wide variety of health issues. The World Health Organization has produced a number of reports showing these linkages, and every year before the COP, The Lancet, a really highly respected medical journal, puts out an issue related to climate and health. Despite this, a 2020 survey from the International Federation of Medical Student Associations found that climate change was taught in only 15% of the curricula. And often the climate change teaching activities were led by students, not by the faculty. Likewise, a study conducted by the nursing program at the University of Pennsylvania in 2018 found that only 1 program in the United States at that time included climate change in the curriculum for nurses, and almost none in programs for emergency medical technicians, or EMTs, that would be your first responders. I think Carol will mention this later, but in numerous surveys, when younger generations are asked what issues are most important to them, climate change is at or near the very top. Yet a report based in 2023 from a survey from Ernst & Young and Junior Achievement concluded that, quote, young people look to their schools to prioritize sustainability education, update the curriculum, often enough to capture current trends, and utilize hands-on learning methods that focus on skills acquisition as much as knowledge acquisitions, end quote. In contrast, a study of K-12 teachers conducted by the Smithsonian Science Education Center and Gallup poll found that by far, US educators ranked lowest compared to teachers in Brazil, Canada, France, and India in receiving the necessary support to incorporate sustainable development topics into the curriculum. They cite a lack of time, instructional materials, and expertise. And I put that back to the colleges and universities because we often prepare the teachers. And although they believe that teaching about sustainability is important, most US teachers, 65%, say that the subject does not fit within the topics they teach, including 59% of those who teach science. So along with mentoring, critical elements of training needed to prepare the interdisciplinary workforce include experiential learning in areas of science, communication, leadership, and across the disciplines, as well as opportunities to put that knowledge into action. So I'm going to talk about 2 or a few networks that are represented here. One is the Youth Environmental Alliance in Higher Education. And this is a group that is led by faculty who all met by coming to the COPs and put together a grant proposal and now has a network that connects institutions of higher ed from all over the globe to provide integrative knowledge to students that empowers them to address complex global environmental problems ranging from pollinator decline and biodiversity loss to climate shifts and ecosystem transformation. It's funded by the National Science Foundation in the United States. The Climate Leaders Academy grew out of the YEA program. It's hosted at Vanderbilt University and brings together students from different universities across the nation with a goal to broaden and diversify the talent pool of future climate leaders. Students are immersed in collaborative climate change learning and undertake team-based projects across a range of disciplines and perspectives, culminating in participation at the COP. SDSN, Australia and New Zealand and Pacific, mobilizes universities and knowledge institutions to play a leading role in addressing the Sustainable Development Goals and is hosted by Monash University in Australia. And it's a regional network of Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is a global initiative of the United States, or the United Nations. Finally, we'll be joined later by Dr. Carol O'Donnell from the Smithsonian Science Education, and I'll introduce her later. So now I'm going to turn to our panelists. And these represent students and early career representatives. And for each of you, to start out, I'd like you to introduce yourselves, describe your top personal interest or concern in the realm of climate and sustainability, and take about 1 minute each. So I'll start here. Allie?
Hello, everyone. My name is Allison. I'm a senior undergraduate student at Moravian University. I'm studying environmental science and journalism. Dr. Husick here is my lovely academic advisor and mentor. I'm very proud to be here with her, representing our institution. For me, the most important environmental issue would probably be the loss of biodiversity, and not only for that impact on habitat and ecosystem function, but also for the sustainment of human communities and our interpersonal and intercultural relationships with one another, and the sustained issues regarding our livelihoods, including human displacement, disease, and food availability.
Hello, everyone. My name is Najma Thomas, and I am actually from Maryland, located within the United States and of Jamaican heritage. For my undergraduate degrees, I obtained 2 degrees at Spelman College and Georgia Institute of Technology, where I received a degree in physics and mechanical engineering, respectively. But after leaving university and working for 2 years, I realized that my passion is actually within sustainable infrastructure design with the primary focus in residential housing. So I decided to migrate to Vanderbilt University to obtain a PhD in civil engineering, where right now my primary focus is actually researching heat stress obtaining for construction and maintenance workers, and seeing if there's a possibility of developing early detection methods using smartwatch technology for a lot of these workers that are working in really, really hot environments, and especially as we talk maybe a little bit later about global warming and increased heat, this topic will come into play more. So that's a little bit more about myself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sasha Gilmore. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I got my bachelor's degree at Dartmouth College. I majored in environmental studies and geography. And right now, I'm currently at Boston University, where I'm a PhD student in the Earth and Environment Department. And my dissertation research focus is on the coupling effect of marine and terrestrial heat waves and how they impact coastal urban populations in terms of subsistence living. So if they apply, if they depend on fisheries for food or other jobs and things like that. So that's what I'll be working on for the next 3 years.
Good evening. My name is DeKenya Goings. I am a Tennessee State University master's student in pursuit of educational technology. I did receive my political science bachelor degree from Tennessee State University as well. My current interest right now is human geography as it pertains to the spatial connections between culture, economics, environment, and human development. As it pertains to climate change and climate action, I am fairly new in this sector, and so I've actually just been learning a lot about climate change and global warming, being a part of Climate Leadership Academy. And most recently, one thing that has really driven my passions is urban sustainability and redesigning these communities. I definitely think that as we do progress within climate action, I definitely think that we're going to have to start redesigning and developing our communities. So that's something that I have a strong interest in currently. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Hamidullah Nadeem. I'm here as a delegate from Monash University, but originally from Afghanistan, which has contributed a lot to the areas of concern and interest I will speak about now. I'm interested in representing marginalized communities at COP and such events, also exploring the intersection between business and sustainability, which has been influenced by my business degree, and also interested and committed to youth leadership in taking climate action. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Nadeem, and thank you to Diane and your Year Network colleagues for organising this side event. My name is Kavian Patmasri, and I am a penultimate year mechanical engineering student at Monash University. I was born and raised in Melbourne, but I am of Sri Lankan heritage, which is something that I'm very proud of. The work that I do at Monash is through the Monash Energy Club, which is a student-run team that aims to connect students with the energy sector, whether that be through industry or academia. And I'm also involved with the Monash branch of the precious plastics movement, which is quite interesting to me. My top issue of interest, I'd have to say, is the decarbonisation of the energy industry in a way that doesn't leave the global south behind.
Hello everyone, my name is Zuray Zafar and I'm a senior at Colorado College majoring in mathematical economics. As an international student from Pakistan, I've always been interested in and continue to be interested in the fields of debt sustainability and especially how it relates to developing countries such as Pakistan. And I intend on pursuing these topics even beyond graduation from Colorado College.
Hi, I'm Lucy Kramer. I'm a sophomore at Colorado College, and I'm a philosophy and anthropology studies and major. And my interest with climate change and sustainability is really looking at ways of life and how that is connected to the way we approach sustainability and obstacles that come specifically with high emitting countries to mitigation and action on that.
So as you can see, we have many different disciplines and fields of study represented here today at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. So my next question to the panelists, and I'll start with the Colorado College students, can you each provide an example of how you've taken the knowledge gained in your college educational experience and moved it into action, whether that's on your campus, your local community, or beyond?
So this past fall break, I was involved in a Keller Family Venture Grant project at Colorado College, which is a field excursion event that you do in your breaks. And what we undertook was a project called Louisiana's Clean Energy Transition, where we went to Louisiana and interviewed many involved actors and asked about their insights into the state's dichotomy, where on one hand they have suffered from devastating consequences of climate change, such as Hurricane Katrina, but on the other hand they also have a very prevalent and, might I add, growing fossil fuel industry. And so we wanted to get to the bottom of that dichotomy and see what the people of Louisiana thought about it.
And I got the opportunity to be part of the Bonner Fellowship, which allows students to go with different community organizations. And I am working with Poetry Heals this year and beyond, so I get the opportunity to work for a 4-year period with this organization. And they're approaching health in a way that moves into a sustainable model that kind of combats the traditional health paradigm of medicalization and where it's very person-centered, but this ties health to the sustainability of our communities, social capital, and allows, it's an emerging model.
So my engineering degree can be a little dry and unimpressive and boring at times. So translating it to people that are interested in the energy sector can be hard. But what I've found is that throughout my degree, I meet a lot of people in academia, in the industry, that are very willing to kind of pass on their knowledge and wisdom to people that are interested in the field, in the same field as them. So I have the privilege of being able to build this network, and I think what the Monash Energy Club does a really good job at is sharing my network and our networks with other young people at Monash University so they can pursue the interests that they have. And what I think the Monash Energy Club does a really great job of is translating our academic knowledge into something that students can look forward to as they transition into a professional sphere at the end of their degrees.
I've studied business administration at Monash University, and we had one unit focused on sustainability in business and also studied leadership towards the degree. So that has inspired me to work with youth back home in Afghanistan and here in Australia. We were the first, with the support of Izzy, she's not here, to organize the first Afghan local conference of youth this year, and which brought hundreds interested youth from across the country for the first time to share and discuss their thoughts about climate change and sustainability. I was also able to organize online trainings because of whatever is happening in the country at the moment, to train and empower youth in Afghanistan about climate change, its impact on gender and security.
Alrighty, so this past fall, I've been able to do two things, accomplish two things, and then one project is in the works, so it's something that I will be continue to pursue after COP and in spring. So first and foremost, I've established a mentorship for just young ladies that is it's regarding self-awareness and leadership within the community. So we're definitely going to slowly gauge and prep these young women to go off and be active leaders within their community, and goes right back to environment and getting to know themselves. Alongside Sasha, throughout this program, we established a educational curriculum for educators, and it's a 6-week intensive. And the 2 weeks that I took over was extreme heat, and the students will undergo a heat simulation that'll help them kind of get in the mind frame of what's going to happen as temperatures continue to rise with climate change rapidly increasing. So having these students starting at a middle school level start to feel what a heat wave is going to feel like because it's coming soon, I think it's definitely going to make them want to do something. It's going to make them want to drive. I think that people, you stimulate change within people when it's firsthand experience. Most people don't care until someone that they know is affected or until they're affected. So this simulation is going to be very hands-on and interactive so that they can experience what climate change and heat wave is going to look like.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And then the second thing is, like I mentioned earlier, with urban development. So I've recently just started to research that, and I've had the great opportunity to connect with some urban developers within my state in Tennessee. So once I get back, I have a meeting where I'll be able to kind of see what the state of Tennessee is doing and what they aren't doing. And with my research, I'll be able to implement some new ideas. So I'm very excited about that.
So like Kenya mentioned, we were working on a project this past semester through the Climate Leaders Academy. And so my part of the curriculum was focusing on sea level rise. So I'm from Los Angeles, so a coastal area in California that is dealing with that issue. And then currently I reside in Boston, which a lot of like the population does reside near the coast. So we'll be affected in the coming years and decades when the sea levels continue to rise because of rising temperatures. So my part of the curriculum is focusing on middle school students to making sure that they are aware of this issue that's happening at a young age so that when they grow up and continue with their education, they can take action with that if they're interested in it. And just to make sure that they know what's going on, how they'll be affected in the coming years, and just to make sure that they're knowledgeable about the changing world that's happening. Like was mentioned, since a lot of the schools don't really integrate climate into the curriculum, we thought that was really important to work on for this past semester. So yeah, upcoming in the spring, I plan to zoom in on one of the schools in Boston, an underserved community that could benefit from this climate curriculum. And then a second thing I worked on this past summer was through our innovation center at BU. It's called the Build Lab. And through the summer, I created this kind of project and this venture idea that I hope to continue with funding in the future. So it's a climate resource center and an accompanying phone app that would be focused on the vulnerable communities in Boston, those who don't have like the resources or the knowledge about climate change, but who are the most affected just because of where they live and just the policies that go on in the city. And so the Climate Resource Center would be a physical center for them to gather in community, to collect resources from the staff that would be there, and just a center to make sure that they're knowledgeable on what's going on and that they can actually take action. I feel like a lot of the communities today, they think that they don't have a voice or that their voices won't be heard, or they don't have the tools and resources to actually make change. So I think putting that in their hands is really important. And then the app part of that, just making sure, like, since we live in the technological age, just making sure that they have like a fast and easy way to access those resources. And also we would hope to be in collaboration with other groups in Boston that do this work so that they can connect with them easily, join the work that they do, and then how to bring that work into their community so that they can foster that in the future.
Great. So for myself, I've been opportuned with many opportunities to learn about STEM education, STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and math, through both my university as well as through prior schooling. But I recognize that I am the product of those who invested in someone like myself, someone who's a part of a historically marginalized community where we do not often get opportunities and access to STEM education. It's not like myself, a Black woman, is incapable of learning and acquiring knowledge, but it's the fact, and there's a void in the opportunity to STEM educational access. With that, we're missing out on opportunities to have diverse perspectives in these academic and professional settings when it relates to STEM education and STEM professions. And so taking that and recognizing that void, a lot of the work I do is a part and reflects on STEM education access. For instance, during the midst of the pandemic, when everything was going on, there was a lot of students who were not simply able to attend school, go to class in their traditional setting. And so through virtual means and in partnership with the National Society of Black Engineers, I was able to orchestrate several programs that gave students in international classrooms access to STEM education. For instance, we had a freshman mentoring connection program where we are able to connect freshmen collegiate students who are often I guess, in a vulnerable population because those students sometimes drop out of school, they may feel left out, et cetera. In that mentoring program, we were able to connect them with professionals in the STEM space so that they can also understand what it means to complete their degree. Additionally, we were also able to work with other corporate partners, such as General Electric and Microsoft, in order to create curriculums for younger middle school students that could be disseminated to virtual classrooms. So this is an area that I'm really, really passionate about and that I love to talk about because when it relates to climate change and climate science and opportunities for innovation, there's a lot of diverse perspectives that should be at the forefront of conversations so that we understand how different climate policies affect different regions globally.
As a student who is focused on environmental science and communications, I really take a keen interest in public scientific outreach, and I really enjoy talking to people. I find that, actionable change comes from, interpersonal relationships with one another and empathy. So I really work to kind of, like on campus, to connect with students to kind of gauge their relationship with the environment and nature and their perspectives on it. And again, this is how we collect diverse voices, as part of this collective movement on climate change. So I'm currently working on a feature story for my university's magazine through conducting interviews and informal conversations with my peers. And I'm working to, kind of communicate our innate human connection to nature and how the benefits of being outside and nature have on our health and well-being. I feel that there's a lot of eco-anxiety among my peers based upon the conversations I've had with them. And I feel as though if I can help to informally educate the community, I can help to kind of bridge that generational gap that we have in our connection to nature and lack thereof. So I feel like to inspire actionable change through public communications work, I can work to promote awareness and the importance of the role of the environment and how that impacts everyone's livelihoods and all interdisciplinary actions.
Thank you. And I don't know about the audience, but I had chills. The examples, the wide array of examples that we heard, where you're really doing things in the community, defined broadly, the innovative ideas of reaching out to teachers. I heard the SDGs inserted into all of those responses, so that's really exciting. So one of the things that we did ahead of COP is sort of an informal survey and tried to get it out to college students as much as we could. And all of these ideas where you just said, where you're doing hands-on, you're taking what you've learned in school and doing something with that, most students don't have that opportunity. Over 65% of the respondents from that survey said they don't, they might take, these were all students who had had a sustainability and a climate change course in their curriculum at some point, but they hadn't had the chance to take that and do anything with it. So this is not the norm, and I think it's something we all need to think about as educators, is moving that education and that enthusiasm and the passion and creativity that our youth have into actual action. So this is the rare chance where each of you get to say, if you had some time with faculty and an administrator, what should they do better? All right, so I'm taking mental notes, but I think it's your chance to say, what would you love to see in education?
Actually, someone mentioned at a panel I attended earlier today that I really appreciated was that oftentimes in academia, our success is measured by publications and our quantity. But again, someone who's focused on communications, I think to myself, this really overlooks like the accessibility of that information that's disseminated into the community. So, what does that mean? Like, how often, can we interact cross-disciplinarily if we don't understand the information, that's being distributed to us through the scientific community? So, I feel like this really inhibits us from achieving collective sustainability goals in society. So I really think that, we throw around these, quantifications and thresholds like the 1.5 degrees Celsius, but, how many students understand what that means or how we can combat that? So I really work to, where I would love to see, more engagement and participation among different levels and different disciplines in all of academia, not just higher ed. And I think that, when we understand more about these real world issues that are, affecting everyone, locally and globally, we can become, more aware and then in turn better prepared once we leave academia, to work with a diverse range of professionals and people across disciplines to really combat these issues. And additionally, working to empower students to make choices that kind of benefit the environment in their everyday lives without having to rely on large governmental corporations to make changes is a really powerful tool and is something that I think should be leveraged more in academia, especially in higher ed. And again, this is only a piece of the puzzle. Obviously, large corporations need to also make changes. But I think that, empowering individuals comes first and foremost in that, because that way we can kind of create a collective motivation of a diverse and large group of people to kind of work towards these larger institutional and political goals that have to occur, in order to combat climate change.
That's an awesome idea. So just to add another perspective as well, you have to really contextualize and make tangible climate change, especially when it comes to not only students within a classroom, but engaging the community as well. Through the Climate Leaders Academy, which is a program underneath the YEN network, in a partnership with Ben Lyons and Shamika Holt, we have been doing a program where we're interacting with a local Nashville high school and building a community garden club, as well as having the students also work with us and actually building a community garden. And one key observation was made. This high school is located within a food desert, which is an area void of an accessible and walkable grocery store. But once we told students about that they were located in a food desert, and once they were made aware of how climate change and climate justice is applicable within their own respective area, their energies completely changed. Beforehand, it's like, okay, I don't know why you all are out of school, you're talking to us, you're not really, getting anything from it. But then once they realized that it affects them as well, their energies changed. We had over 60 plus signups for the Community Garden Club because students wanted to learn how they can actually take part in this initiative and get a helping hand because it affects them. And so when it comes to classroom spaces, sometimes when we're doing research and we're, learning about these different communities, sometimes I feel like we're getting this narrative that it's an other problem, that climate change is a problem that doesn't necessarily affect us. But it really does. And so sometimes when you make accessible and make aware how climate change is in your own respective area, energies change. And there's a lot more emphasis on climate change work. There's a lot more excitement about it. So that's my little, 2 cents if I were talking to any of my professors or whatever about climate change and how we can better our own classroom settings and engaging students, especially youth, about how they can get involved with climate change work.
So like was mentioned, I think on the panel, this is very not a common thing that a lot of students may be working on or knowledgeable about. I think I've had the privilege of growing up in California. I feel like our academics, especially in high school, had a lot of climate focus, so I think I was lucky in that respect. And that's kind of why I was interested in continuing this in higher education with my undergrad and then now graduate career. So I think going back to like me and DeKenya's project with the curriculum, like also was mentioned that teachers say they don't have enough time to input that into that curriculum. So I think like having someone from the outside maybe come in with an already formed curriculum that they can input into their classroom would be really helpful. And I also think like making it kind of interdisciplinary. It doesn't just have to be in the science classroom. It can be in the English classroom. It can be in the social sciences classrooms. I think climate change is a very big topic that spreads across all of those. So I don't think it just has to be a science class specific topic. And then a second thing, I think that higher institutions should take kind of the initiative to partner with climate and environmental organizations to kind of show their students as an example of like what's going on in the world, who they can possibly work with. I think one of the first steps for a lot of students that's the hardest is like making those connections themselves, taking that first step of like reaching out to someone that they want to work with. I think that's the most scary part. So I think if higher institutions kind of already have those formed connections that they can pass down to their students, I think it would make it a lot easier for them to continue with the work that they're truly passionate about and want to work on. So I think like it definitely should start from the top down so that students don't feel too afraid to kind of go into this field. It's very daunting, and I think keeping that kind of incentive of like hope is a really important thing for students because climate change, it is kind of like a downing subject, but I think we need to keep hope to put these solutions in place and to keep going. So I think that's my take on it.
So I definitely think this question is a little bit loaded, and it would take a lot more time to really unpack. I could agree with my colleagues here that there's a lot of things that we could implement. Community gardens, I love the idea. Some of the things that you said down there, I love it. I love all the ideas. But I think from an educator's perspective, and then also as being a student simultaneously, I think the one thing that we could and we should be doing is inspiring people. I think before we can actually get people to participate and be interactive within their community and want to fight climate change, they have to feel inspired. So I was working at a middle school where it was very underprivileged. They didn't have a lot of resources, and the students, like outside of school, they had real world issues. So them coming in, most of them, this was their only meal of the day. You know, like this is their only, hey, how you doing? So their emergencies and what they were really concerned about in life was a little bit differently with inside of their school. And so when I started to talk about climate change with them, it was a science class. They didn't care that much, but when I started to break down that, hey, the animals that you love, and I started to pinpoint each and every one of them, the monarch butterfly, the bear, and I just started like listing different animals that were going extinct. They started to feel this sense of, oh my God, like I actually really care about that animal. And just having that dialogue with them, it started to make them feel inspired in a way. And so what I'm saying all of that to say is that I really feel like that if we inspire students and individuals that you can do something, this does affect you, I definitely think it would go a long way. I think we'll have more agents of change. We'll have more people actively wanting to participate in climate change and wanting to do something because they feel like they can. I think a lot of times people don't pursue higher education because they didn't have an educator they felt like cared about them. They didn't inspire them. They didn't have anything to look forward to. So I think if we start there, we'll be able to actually get all of these ideas off the ground.
Thank you. I think there's a saying which says great minds think the same. My ideas will overlap with the colleagues' ideas here. One of the important things for me is, and it comes from the experience of meeting people, is that when they graduate from the university, yeah, they have theories in their mind, but they don't have the practical knowledge. I think it will be really, really important for the universities to bridge this gap between practice and theory. So when youth are going into the real world, they're not saying that we have knowledge, but they say, okay, we have done something, we have the experience, and we can make a difference. The other thing, as mentioned by our colleagues here, is the interdisciplinary approach. Climate is not only a science issue. We need people from medicine, we need people from engineering, we need people from comms, we need people from law. So when we bring all of them together, that's when we can tackle this challenge and break this down. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Obviously, as an engineering student, I have plenty of opportunity to start doing subjects that are relevant to climate action. So over the course of my degree, I've done units from international relations to hydropower, all of which kind of lead me to where I am today. And obviously, being here next to such wonderful young leaders is a luxury that lots of students at university, my cohort, don't have. And something universities can do is really invest in those students that may not have the financial means or even just the time or resources to pursue sustainability-related activities. The wonderful Dr. Susie Ho, who's part of the YEAR network, she's worked tirelessly on a program at Monash called the Global Immersion Guarantee, where students get to go overseas on a fully funded program and work with local leaders on environmental projects, and they produce real-world results that kind of balance environmental protection, sustainability, and things like social and economic development. I think a lot of universities can invest in programs like these, models like these, to ensure that all young people have a chance to make a difference in the world. And when you take part in programs like this, when you finish your degree, you're not chasing dollar signs, you're chasing something real, something beautiful. And I think that's what universities really have to do over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I'd love to give an example from Colorado College, which has a on-campus think tank essentially called the State of the Rockies Project. And this think tank offers fellowships to students as young as freshmen. And I remember I've been a research fellow with them since I was a freshman. And I recall in my freshman year, I didn't know the second thing about research. But yet I was given this fellowship and the opportunity to delve deeper into an area of interest that I could make a career out of. And so providing students the opportunities at a young age, at a young level, when they're just getting into the field of academia, when they don't know, especially at liberal arts colleges, where they don't know essentially where they're headed, where they don't in many cases know their major, that is something that makes a decisive impact. And that is the recommendation that I would make to other school administrators, is to not just follow Colorado College's path, but to implement solutions that would suit their students, especially in those developmental phases of their academic life.
Thank you all for your suggestions. And then from my anthropological perspective, I see a really important opportunity to look at and use our own lives and our patterns, especially from high emitting countries and regions, to use that in classrooms to talk about, what can we change? We are in this time and it's not the only option, and work together to kind of have that agency over these processes. And furthermore, I think it would be really important in this process of looking at our own lives and thinking how we want to move forward, to have different stakeholders, to have indigenous communities within and around our colleges, and also just organizations like I got to work with, in order to create new paradigms, to show that there are different ways of thinking and going about life. And in general, that's just my comment about higher education and processes like COP, is to look at root causes and how can we better do that in universities. And then finally, one just really big thing that's going to be this is going to have to be with someone a little higher up, I don't know who, but treating university as a social good and not just an investment, which, the price of college in the U.S. specifically, has pushed many of my friends into paths that are going to be careers, which is the market approach. But instead, in some countries where university is seen as more of a common good and an ability to work towards societal problems, that in general would, I think, inspire more creativity and more ability to get at root causes, as opposed to being just a financial investment in a career that already exists.
I pull this council together to help advise, higher ed organizations worldwide. But because those of you who are in the room, I'm guessing this is a topic of interest to you, and I'm thinking there's probably some really good ideas out in the audience, either about examples that you know of about moving knowledge to action, or ideas that you would love to give to that college president. So this is your time to participate. And I teach. I'm used to being patient and waiting for that first hand. Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so this stems from a discussion that me and some of the fellow CLA students had a couple hours ago. So I and some of the other students here are students at state universities. And in the US, one of the really great things about being at a state university is that you have an extension office in every single county. So we were discussing possible ways that universities can sort of spread climate change knowledge and education about it into marginalized communities that don't have access to higher education. and we were talking about state universities possibly using those extension offices and all of those like existing tools in order to broaden their reach in that area. So that was just one possible thing.
And if you're not from the U.S., extension offices are from the land-grant universities and meant to, help farmers. There's master gardeners. There's all kinds of, watershed experts, and you name it, to give advice, theoretically, from the expertise of the university back to that common good. And sometimes there's a real disconnect. There's not a lot of conversations going on. All right, where's my other good ideas? Good.
Hi, I'm Catherine Eglin, and I'm from the United States. I chair the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee for the NAACP National Board of Directors. I'm also a retired educator, if there is such a thing, because I can guarantee you that in my retirement, I have worked longer, harder hours as a volunteer on this issue than I ever did as an educator. What I'm going to suggest, something that we do and we have done, not only do I chair the NAACP ECJ committee, but I am the co-founder of my Gulf regional-based organization, ECHO, which is an acronym for Education, Economics, Environmental, Climate, and Health Organization, and it's based in Gulfport, Mississippi. On top of everything else, I'm a survivor of Hurricane Katrina. We, 4 years ago, we took a group of students, high school students, because this is where I think we should start, even earlier. The earlier I think you start, the better. I think once you want to start reaching out at higher education level, it's just better to start a lot earlier. So we took a group of high school students to Reykjavik, Iceland, so that they could experience sea level rise firsthand. Of course, that's very expensive. It's not, you can't easily duplicate it. But I think along with influencing the higher education professional, it would be great if I could have these students to try talk to some of the younger students that we deal with. We partner with the local high school and junior high school. So I want to say thank you. I was actually only stayed in here sending some emails, and I was going to be leaving out. And now I'll be leaving COP with this being one of the high points, because it's telling me that I am not wasting my time in so-called retirement, because this generation, this next generation of leaders will be picking up the torch and running with it. So thank you so much.
You're gonna, excuse me, you're gonna love Carol's talk. Let's see. You know what? Gil, you want to say anything?
Another idea.
No? Okay, yes, please.
I don't know if the, okay, there it goes. So, and this may be something that everybody may not immediately agree with, but I'm still gonna put it out there anyway. So I definitely think that within K through 12 environments, we should use less technology. So I know that a lot of people are fighting for AI and pushing towards using technology, but it is a double-edged sword. And so, again, when I was working in the middle school and I was speaking with some of the students, I just asked them one day, just kind of getting to know them, and back to that inspiration, having conversation with them, I asked them, how many of you like to learn with technology? In a room of 25, I expected all of them to say yes. Only 2 said they enjoyed learning with technology. I asked them why. All of them said they feel like, 1, they're learning nothing, and 2, they weren't connected with the environment. I remember growing up in elementary school, we had outdoor classrooms. So there was a few times out of the week we would actually go out in our garden in the back of our school, and then we would also trail our woods as well, where they would label the trees and the plants based off their species. And so I feel like if we start implementing those things at a early age, less technology and more outdoor classrooms, I think more people want to be agents of change. They'll feel like, okay, I've experienced this since I was young, and as I get older, this is about to be taken away from me, and it'll establish a sense of like, okay, I care. I want to help change. So that's just something I wanted to put out there. I know that we are fighting for technology, and with me even being an educational technology major, I know it's like whatever, but like I'll sit in on my AI classes and I'm just like, I don't like this, I don't like it, I don't like it. But I'm just there to kind of, take in what the new world is about to look like. So that's just another suggestion.
Any other? Yeah.
How you doing? I'm Clay. I'm an undergraduate student at Brandeis University, near Boston. It's in Waltham. And something that I've heard a couple of people talk about, but I really wanted to emphasize, is I've done personally, before college and during, a lot of local advocacy work, a lot of local government work, and work with local conservation organizations and things that are involved with climate and the environment. And I think that a lot of university students, at least in the United States, where I'm from, have a kind of a bubble when they're a student, when they're in education. And it's very difficult to get out of the mindset of that bubble of where you're thinking, where you're operating in. And something that I think is important to emphasize, and something that not a lot of education emphasizes enough, is the importance of like hands-on projects and collaborations with outside local groups and organizations, whether it be through government or advocacy groups or conservation groups. I think having that as a formalized thing, as part of education, as part of courses, would be a more powerful change, because a lot of people simply don't understand what the kind of hands-on aspect of the kind of larger talks about environmental stuff are really about, what the effects of it are about.
I mean, we think about, would we want a doctor who had never, a surgeon who had never done real practice on surgery? Would we want, somebody in any discipline, a musician who's never actually had their hands on a piano or an instrument? And yet we want students to go out into this big complex world of climate change or sustainability and say, well, you learned it in a book or in a boring lecture. We need that hands-on to make it real and to make really our leaders and our experts come alive. Anyone else? All right. Oh, good.
Okay. So I go to Michigan Technological University. I work with the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And I think that in education, we really tend to stick to Western ideals of science and knowledge. And I think that perpetuates the status quo as it is currently. And we're just coming up to Band-Aid solutions to big problems. So I think we need to look outside of these Western frameworks of science, include indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. And I think that changing that kind of paradigm and that way of thinking is a way forward and a way for, real substantial change.
And Lucy, I think that was one of the points that you were making, and I hear from, working in diverse communities and getting ideas from a variety of aspects. Well, I'm going to move on. We'll have more time for some Q&A later, but I want to introduce our speaker. Let's see, I've got too many buttons here to press. There you go. Dr. Carol O'Donnell is a senior executive and director of the Smithsonian Science Education Center, dedicated to transforming K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. So our person from Mississippi, this is going to make your time here even more valuable. Carol serves on numerous national and international committees dedicated to STEM education, including, this is a long list, the Federal Coordination in STEM Education, whose purpose is to advise and assist the Committee on STEM Education and the Director of the Office in Science Technology Policy in the developing strategic investments in STEM education across federal agencies in the U.S. Jeez, That's only one thing. The Inter-Academy Partnership with Science Education Global Council, an appointment by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and the UN Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development Working Group for Digital Learning. She began her career as a primary school teacher, so never retires, and served as a group leader and program officer at the U.S. Department of Education. So I'm going to have you come up, Carol, and share some wisdom with us about your cool ideas.
This one? Yeah, thank you so much, Diane. So first of all, it's so good to see all of you. How many of you, including on the panel, came to Washington, D.C. and spent some time with us? Yeah, it's so good to see you again on the road to COP. We brought everyone to the Smithsonian Institution, where there's 21 museums along the National Mall. And we held a pretty cool, I think, 2-day event, thanks to all of you who organized it, to Jillian. The Smithsonian is a big place, 21 museums, 21 libraries, a zoo, Conservation Biology Institute, 9 research centers, and 5 education centers. And I direct the Smithsonian Science Education Center. But at the Smithsonian, we have an initiative called Life on a Sustainable Planet. And we actually launched it last year at COP27. And that initiative is basically trying to bring under one umbrella the important role that institutions like the Smithsonian, in collaboration with partners like the universities that are represented here, and young people across the globe, play in trying to ensure life on a sustainable planet. So our research is only as good as its application. And so the Smithsonian, have any of you ever been to the Smithsonian Institution? Other than those maybe who actually came during the road to COP. So that's great to know that you were there. The Smithsonian Institution believes deeply, of course, in the dissemination of knowledge and the increase of knowledge. So increase of knowledge through research, but this is dissemination of knowledge through education. And the Smithsonian Science Education Center is only one small piece of that. And basically, what the Smithsonian Science Education Center does is we work with students ages 5 to 18. So before they get to where you all are in college. And it was wonderful to hear all of your recommendations to the university of what they can do better, because all I kept thinking is that's exactly what we're doing with K through 12, so ages 5 to 18, with students around the world, trying to get them to a place where they deeply believe in connecting to their local community, as so many of you said, making certain that education is transdisciplinary, not siloed into disciplines, making certain that they are solving real-world problems, so getting out into the community and using their community as their laboratory, and not deeply embedded in a piece of technology, as we also heard. So at the Smithsonian Science Education Center, we have 3 goals: innovation in STEM education, inclusion in STEM education, and also sustainability, sustainable development. So I was really happy to hear the comment that you made about the importance of not just westernized knowledge, but other ways of knowing, and how important that is to represent in our science teaching. So as many of you may have seen, there was a UNESCO report that came out, and that UNESCO report had several findings that the Smithsonian Institution has been drawing on. So some of those findings were that over half of 100 countries reviewed in a recent survey said that there was no mention of climate change in their national curriculum. So when each of you, including those of you who are in the audience, when you were in grades K through 12, do you remember learning about climate change? So raise your hand if you remember at some point you learned something about climate change. Okay. Now keep your hand up if you also were asked to think about actions and solutions that you could implement in your communities to address climate change. Okay, so fewer hands, but still a couple of hands. That's what we should be doing in schools, right? Not just teaching the science or concepts that are important to climate change, but also the social aspects and the behavioral aspects. What can you do to improve climate change? The second big finding of this UNESCO survey was that while 95% of surveyed primary and secondary school teachers felt that teaching climate change is important, less than 30% of them said that they were ready to teach it. So they think climate change teaching is important, but they're not really ready for it. They don't have the expertise to teach it. And then finally, this UNESCO global survey also found that 70% of young people said that they do not feel ready for climate change based on what they've learned. So they might be learning about climate change, like you put your hand up, but they might not be ready learning the right things about climate change, like, for example, other ways of knowing. So with the Smithsonian, one of our board members, who's with Ernst & Young, and one of our collaborators, Junior Achievement Worldwide, got together last year and they put together a survey. And they wanted to survey young people. And these young people were divided into different generations. So what are some of the generations, for example, that exist? Just throw one out there. Gen Z? What is that? What else? Millennials? And what's the greatest generation? Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, baby boomers, that's what I am. So there's all these different generations, but they focused on just the youth generations. And what they found in this 1,200 different respondents across 72 countries was that their knowledge of sustainability, guess where they get it from? They get their ideas about sustainability from social media. So how many of you on the panel use social media for a source of information? Right. So that's what Gen Z said. We're getting most of our information about sustainable development and climate change from social media. But guess what source of information they think is the least trusted? Social media, right. So even though they're getting their information from social media, they don't trust it, but they're still using it. And I think the reason that we understand Generation Z doesn't trust social media is because they're the ones posting it, and they know that they're not necessarily always checking their facts before they do. Plus, we know there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation in social media because there's not checks on it. They do not get their information from schools or teachers. Only 15% of it's coming from there. Yet, we know that when we asked them, or they were asked, who do you trust the most for getting your information? Guess who young people, Gen Z in particular, said that they trust the most for getting their information about sustainable development and climate change? Who do they trust the most? Teachers, right, educators. Also, Gen Alpha, so the youngest, and Gen Z say they want to learn about sustainable development. They want to learn about climate change in school. They don't think they are, but they want it. And they also agree that education plays a critical, important role in helping them to lead a more sustainable life. So we decided at the Smithsonian Institution, we were also going to conduct a survey, but not of young people, of educators. So we wanted to find out, are educators saying the same thing as young people are saying? Just like you asked the question, what do you want? You asked, what do you want of higher education? So making sure that what are young people asking for, what are educators giving them? So this was a survey that we just released in September during Climate Week. It's called Educating for Sustainable Development, and the report is available in that QR code. And here are some of the things that we found. So the first was that across 5 different countries that we surveyed, so Brazil, Canada, North America, France, India, which are all very different in terms of their educational systems in all different parts of the world, we found out that sadly, in the United States, teachers' perspectives demonstrated that teachers in the United States are 3 times less likely than all other teachers in the survey to say that they feel as if they have the time to teach about sustainable development and climate change, that they have the expertise, and that they have the support. So in other words, teachers in the US don't feel they have the expertise, they don't feel they have the time, they don't feel they have the support from parents or school boards to teach about climate change and sustainable development. And yet, 3 times more likely, so 60% in the other countries of teachers are saying, yes, we have the time, we're given the support, we're told to teach this, and we get the right instructional materials. So that's bad. The United States teachers are not being given the tools they need. The second finding was that when we asked them about the Sustainable Development Goals, we gave them 11 of the Sustainable Development Goals. It was the science Sustainable Development Goals, the socio-scientific Sustainable Development Goals, which teachers in the United States and other countries were most likely to say, they're not part of our curriculum, we're not really teaching that. For example, climate action, clean energy, clean water, sustainable communities, the kinds of things that we believe as science educators should be taught in schools. And then finally, the last finding was that, which was the best finding, was that no matter where teachers lived, they believed teaching about sustainable development was important. And they also believed that it makes students feel more connected to the real world and feel as if they are more connected to their local communities, and also believe that they are more interested in science. So I'm going to show you some of the graphs from the actual full report. Oh, no, I'm not. So if I back up this last finding where we said that teachers say we believe teaching about sustainable development is important, we also ask them, all right, well, if it's important, what do you need from us? Just like you asked, what do you need from students? Or what do you need from higher ed? The teachers told us we want field experiences. We want to bring our students out into the community. And did you hear the panel? They said that. Get out into the community, learn from outside, not just sitting behind a computer. The other thing that the teachers told us is that they want to learn from scientific experts. So they want scientists in classrooms and communicating directly with students. And then the other thing that they said is like, we just need more information as teachers, professional development. So what the Smithsonian decided to do in response to that was develop a set of free resources that are designed for ages 11 to 18, but we're also finding are being used in college students' classrooms, in biology classrooms, et cetera. And they're based around these topics that are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, like biodiversity and biodiversity loss, biotechnology and the ethics of it, so the ethics of technology, COVID-19, environmental justice, right? Food security, mosquito-borne diseases, sustainable communities, vaccines, and all of those guides are available for free to the public. The idea of these guides is really to do everything that these students said they want out of education, which is to get students to be able to answer questions that are important to them, not questions that are dictated by some textbook, but questions that they are coming up with, scaffolded by this learning experience. Because students come to us with a lot of questions. They want to know about the world around them. So why aren't we allowing them to address and learn science by answering questions that they care about? The second thing was that students wanted to get out into the community. So we get them to investigate these complex topics using their community as their laboratory. And then we engage them in kind of critical thinking and critical systemic understanding, and then they use that information, synthesize it to develop actions. So if each of you think about your own work, how many of you believe at some point in your career as a student, you have come up with some solution to a problem you've identified and gone out and acted against it? Raise your hand if you think that at some point in my life, I've developed a solution to something and tried to solve a problem in my community. And how about all of you? Yeah, so that each one of us wants to feel connected to the world around us. We want to feel as if we can make a difference in our community. And even those small micro actions do make a difference. And so that's the way this kind of learning is structured. We call it discover, understand, and act. These are some students that were in Egypt last year that came to visit us at COP who were engaged in this program locally. To date, we've been in 88 countries, 4.7 million students, 41,000 educators have gone through this professional development training, and all of this is free. And these quotes that we're collecting from teachers and videos we've been collecting from students have just been incredible. So I'll read one from a high school science teacher in the United States. And this teacher said, "My students took action to get rid of styrofoam in their cafeteria after learning from the Smithsonian guide. This changed my perspective as an educator, as I realized that my students were more capable of action and deep thinking than I previously realized." And then a science educator in the Philippines said, "In utilizing these guides, differences in background became a resource for accomplishing the tasks. Students appreciated science as a tool to understand and to serve their community." And that's what we feel good about, right? That students feel connected to the world around them. So I just want to share a couple of examples from some of the student action projects that we've collected from all over the world. A young student in Egypt basically went out, studied their native flora, and then began to plant that on their school campuses in order to preserve their biodiversity. A student from Uruguay redesigned their local coastal land use plan to meet their community needs. A student in Panama, and I actually met this student, so I haven't met all of these students, of course, developed a nature-based mosquito repellent working with a local chemical company to combat the spread of malaria, which is very prevalent in Panama. Another student in the Philippines held a sustainability expo to showcase their local efforts to their businesses as a way of advocacy. And then finally in France, in one of our exchange programs, they designed this green bus shelter. Now, they didn't come up with this idea on their own. They found it on the internet. But they created this green bus shelter to beautify the bus, create a pollinator garden, but also to improve the air quality. So they were addressing biodiversity and also pollution at the same time as beautifying an urban environment. So next up is these two guides. We just released Energy on Energy Day here at COP28. That guide helps students understand where does their energy sources come from. So keep in mind, these guides don't imagine when you're learning, and I'm just going to tell you all the different ways that energy is produced now. In this, you go home, you do your own energy audit, try to find out where do you get energy from, how do you use energy, and what are sustainable energy sources. And it's based on you and your own community. And in February, we're going to launch a guide called Ocean, singular, because there's just one. And in that, we're going to help students, no matter where they live, feel connected to the ocean. So how many of you have ever seen an ocean? You've been there, okay. How many of you live next to an ocean? Very few of us, right? So we work all over the world, and in a lot of places, students have never seen an ocean, and they've never been to an ocean, and they don't live near one. But they're deeply connected to the ocean because it's a large, complex system. And we help kids understand the things that they do throughout the day, which actually are directly tied to what's happening in the ocean, including your food source. So anyway, that's coming up in February, and I'm just so thrilled to work with you, Gil, Diane, the work that you're doing, Susie, all of you, because you're creating this next generation of youth, and we're helping to make your job just a little easier by making sure that they're a little better prepared by the time they get to college, although this is the cream of the crop here. So anyway, well, thank you for including me and inviting me here.
So we have plenty of time for questions, and I heard that there was something from online. Do you have that to read?
Yes, that's true. So the question goes like this. Good evening, my name is Crystal Franco. I'm Brazilian, and I would like to say that we have a greenfield pilot project located in Rio de Janeiro, and we want to encourage young people to participate in a practical way in changing mentality regarding climate issues and with practical actions.
Thank you. That sounds fantastic. And again, that hands-on, that doing things. Anybody in the audience have a question for Carol? so over here, yep, yep.
Hi, my name is Kennedy.
I have a child named Kennedy.
Lovely. I'm like, we're all connected. I'm like,
Yes,
it's a small
see?
world. I have been through, I'm one of the students that's in the Climate Leaders Academy, and I have been working with a middle school in Washington, D.C., and they are, I just love them so very much. And so as a law student right now, that we go on like Wednesdays to go talk to them during lunch, and I was wondering if the Smithsonian had any events or ways that as a student who's still a student helping younger students could utilize these guides, or if you had any tips or advice on that.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we just finished writing, of course, this energy guide, and then we have other guides like environmental justice, other guides that have like just like a couple of things that you could do with a student that are very simple. For example, create an identity map. Because before you dive into studying a topic, let's imagine it's fresh water or it's clean energy. Imagine a student just comes up with a way of thinking about themselves first, because if they create an identity map, so they put their name in the center of a piece of paper, they write some things about themselves around that, they talk to each other about their identity, things that make them who they are, and then they begin to see connections with others, they start to realize that their identity actually influences what they think about the world around them. So if we talk about the issue of environment, we often hear the term environmental justice or environmental injustices. By starting with an identity map, a student might begin to think, oh, okay, so I'm a student, I live in an urban environment, I also live in an area where there's a lot of pollutants. Maybe I live near the Anacostia and there's water pollution, and the Anacostia is a real thing. And they begin to tie their own identity to some of these scientific issues that they're studying. So I would say, like, one simple thing would be to do an identity map. But we would love to talk to you, Kennedy, and just give you some examples of some of the free access to resources and help you come up with some ideas based on how much time you have with them. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for giving your time like that.
Hi, Carol. I was also in DC. My name is Leah Dundon with Vanderbilt University and the Climate Leaders Academy. And I want to ask you, I know you're part of the Smithsonian and not part of an academic institution, but one thing I struggle with in the academy is that the whole model is really built around separation from the community. Like many institutions even have literal walls, or even some of the best universities, Oxford, think of, there is a wall. And maybe that model worked sort of when those schools were up and coming, but now we have such a different connection to knowledge and technology. So it's just sort of if you have any advice for like people on the inside that would like to see some holes in those walls, some windows built, in how we might talk about it, think about it, approach. I mean, I'm not asking you like how do we approach our administration, but just any kind of thoughts you have on what you might tell people inside the system how to add those windows to our walls.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question, because I would say, to be brutally honest, the Smithsonian Institution, which is 177 years old, probably had its own, while not physical, walls up. Our belief was always, if you want to learn about ideas that are within our museums, come to us. And it's free, and we'll let you come through the door. But the problem is, only a very small percentage of people who live even just in the United States ever make their way to Washington, D.C. to come into our museums. And with our new secretary, Secretary Lonnie Bunch, who started in 2019, whose background has always been in diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, he started to realize it's not about people coming to us and us sharing knowledge that we happen to have up here with you because we think it's important. He started to realize that our community wasn't just the people who walked through the door. Our community was everyone in the United States and beyond. And so he put in place a strategic plan that's called Our Shared Future. And he started to really engage and outreach. And the way he did it was through one word, and that was education. he started putting the word education in everything we did because he knew it was the one place where you could go out into the community and meet people where they are. And so I think all universities need to get to the point where they realize that their job is to increase and diffuse knowledge, just like the Smithsonian. But if you do that just by waiting for people to come to you, which is what universities do, we're missing a whole population of individuals who we could be reaching. So I think, like the Smithsonian, get out of your own way and meet people where they are, both physically and kind of, literally. So that's what I would recommend. Not that anybody would listen, but.
Thanks, Carol. It's Sarah Hautzinger from Colorado College and part of the YAD network. You've spoken about environmental justice most recently, but also about how the social science elements are often missing from curricula in the United States and elsewhere. And I'm wondering your thoughts about how do we prepare students from the global north for a world that is demanding loss and damage from the wealthier nations. That's often a piece that's really difficult and missing from especially K-12 curricula, but also higher ed. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think first of all, and again, I go back to these incredible voices on the panel here, that teaching, unfortunately, has been very siloed for too many years, very discipline focused, and each one of you talked about how important that was. And so I think the first thing is that this idea, when we talk about topics today, we don't say scientific anymore. We say socio-scientific. And I remember the first time I used that term about 7 years ago, I got slammed by a scientist who said, that's not what you should be saying, just focus on the science, but you can't. And so I would say, if all we did during COVID-19 was focused on the data, the scientific data of COVID-19, we would never have solved the problem. We needed to also focus on how people are responding to it, so the social sciences side. So from a young age, I would say that for us, we have to educate students not just on the science, but on the multiple perspectives. So the social perspective, the economic perspective, the political perspective, the ethical perspective, and then of course the environmental or scientific perspective. So I think making sure that we're taking multiple perspectives when we address a scientific issue in a science classroom allows us to break down those silos that exist. So I think that's the first way, is always integrate perspective taking, which is a social emotional learning competency, into the teaching of science. The other is take a transdisciplinary approach to teaching, which is recognize that if someone walks into my classroom, and I'm a science teacher, and they can't tell whether I'm teaching science, social studies, history, art, or culture, then I've been very successful. Because I've taken all of those disciplines and brought them together around a particular problem, and knowing that real world problems don't have these silos, they are very complex. And so that, if we can get our teaching to be more on a pathway to convergence and transdisciplinary learning, then I think we know we've succeeded. It doesn't mean we get rid of disciplinary learning and basic knowledge. We still need that. But we need to get our teaching to a pathway to where disciplines converge. I hope that answered your question.
A question to our panelists for Carol.
Got a question. Obviously, as an educational institution, with the rise of disinformation and misinformation, you'd be copping a lot of flack from perhaps people that just aren't aware or apathetic or ignorant about the causes that you're passionate about. How do you deal with the emotional labour of having to deal with these type of people, and how do you change kind of their perspective or views on the work that you do?
So one of the challenges, of course, you talked about misinformation and disinformation. So when we did our survey with Gallup, the United States was at the very bottom in terms of our teaching these topics to students, and climate action was at the very, very bottom. of all the disciplines, all the topics. The question is like, why does a country like the United States face such issues around educating students on climate change? What happens is because we have a lot of access to not only misinformation, so incorrect information, but disinformation, intentional telling people information that is not true. We learned from the youth survey that many people are relying on social media for that information, and there's not a lot of filtering of misinformation or disinformation. So in all disciplines, science is one of the most important areas in which we have to address misinformation and disinformation campaigns. And so there are scientists who study how to address those topics in classrooms, and I think it's when students are responsible for collecting data from their local environment, they are the source of that. They know where that information's coming from. And so it's really hard it's hard to challenge that the data is not real because the student has collected it. And then the second is we give students tools in the Smithsonian Science for Global Goals project to be able to assess whether the information is from a trusted source. So, is it, where'd the information come from? Did you get it from social media? If you did, what's the source of the information? Do you have another way to validate the data or the information? So there's a whole checklist. And I think that does help address it as well. It makes sure that we empower each of us to make certain that we're not just accepting information because it was given to us, but we're using the tools of checking through and making certain that it's a source of information that we can trust.
Thank you so much. Oh, here's the microphone. Thank you so much for all the helpful information. I love the Smithsonian guidelines. I think those are so important, especially in these nice, easy to read formats. My question really relates to how do we keep and maintain the longevity of climate science programs in schools? So for instance, a lot of the stories I hear is that students were exposed to climate, maybe through a really cool teacher, a really professor who was really aware of a lot of climate change mitigation strategies. But then once they leave that space, it's off the table. They no longer hear about it maybe for a couple of years or until they're approached with that problem. So my question is, do you have any advice in regards to how to maintain the longevity of certain programs to make sure that students are getting multiple touch points of climate science and not just a singular point of contact?
First of all, that's a fantastic question. Really good question. There's something called learning progressions that the field of education uses, which just basically means let's make certain as educators that we're thinking about how to introduce a topic to students over time. That it is not just something, as you noted so beautifully, that is at a touch point, like, okay, in 4th grade, we're going to teach about climate science, and then you'll never hear it about again. But instead, we create these learning progressions where it's gradually introduced over time. And so in the United States, we have the Next Generation Science Standards, and for the first time, climate change is integrated in a comprehensive way from kindergarten all the way up till 12th grade. Now, not all school systems have adopted it. Some have taken that part out because it's been politicized in many ways. But this idea of making certain that it's comprehensively across the curriculum from kindergarten through 12th is really important. And then the second I would say is that we do have good examples in the United States and other countries as well, where we've also, some of the states in the United States are asking that climate change be taught in every discipline, not just science. So New Jersey, California are making certain, for example, that we're finding ways to get at the question around social science and that it's not just a science classroom, but it's a social studies classroom or it's your math classroom. And that's been another way of making sure that it's not just one singular touch point. So, great question.
That's a great question. And I'm seeing this blinking, flashing timer, which means we're really coming close, and I have one more quick round of for my panelists. But I heard earlier that we need inspiration, and we need hope, and we need examples, not just those, one point here or there. And I'm going to just totally embarrass her, but there are educators out there who are practitioners, and Heidi Silvestre is a glaciologist, and the internet allows us to bring in these experts to do these fantastic classes, about real-world examples, and Heidi was one for us, and ended up doing this really phenomenal over COVID when we were all stuck, and students wanted to do things in the field and couldn't do it. She worked remotely from France with one of our students in Pennsylvania to use remote sensing data from Svalbard. And that student now is in Iceland doing her graduate work on glaciology. And we need more Heidis. But what I want to do is, for this panel that I've been so excited to listen to, and thank you, Carol, for adding to that. But we did something the other day. Some of you, we were like, just a couple words. I want you to leave this audience with a couple words that inspires them. And I guess I'll start with you, Allie.
I guess, my statement here is kind of framed around, the youth-led initiatives and, suggestions and ideas that we have. And I guess my statement would be that, allow yourselves to feel inspired by our youth. We can be unconventional. We have new ways of thinking. That's, what this movement is about. It's very ever-evolving, ever-changing, interdisciplinary. And additionally to, bring these important conversations, back into your community and, frame them from a solution-based perspective, to empower the people in your community as well.
Okay, quickly. I would say, and the phrase that we have in the United States is, try to walk in someone else's shoes. Understand that you can never truly walk in someone else's shoes, but we can try to understand the shoe type and shoe pathway. And we should approach climate science in that regard.
Yeah, so I think the younger population has like a reputation that like we don't care enough or things like that, we don't know enough. So I think like making sure that other generations know that like, which we've seen throughout this whole session, that the youth are excited to learn about climate change and enact this solution. So I think like having hope and like, I guess, faith in the younger population to be the future climate leaders of the world is really important.
All right, I would say go inward. I think in order for us to create valuable solutions to climate change, it's going to really start with connecting with yourself within. Nature, Earth is literally a reflection of the human body. So the more that you know yourself, the more that you're connected with yourself, it's going to be natural to not only connect with others, but be able to connect with nature. So I would say go inward. I would also like to share something that someone told me a long time ago, which made sense to a lot of things in my life, in all areas. But he said, you can give a homeless person $1, you can give them a t-shirt, you can give them anything, but it's only going to help them for right now. The greatest thing you can do for someone is inspire them, so.
Thank you. I'll keep it simple. I think youth possess the energy, they have the passion, they are committed to take actions. Please give them the opportunity where you can and support them where possible to take climate action.
My thoughts would be in the same vein as Nadim's. There are plenty of young people doing great climate action work out there. Don't reinvent the wheel, just give it a lick of paint and a bit of rubber, and those young people will keep doing great work.
Someone reminded me yesterday that the climate discussion it's very important to think about values, and they talked about respect and reciprocity, and it's important for us to think, what do we all need for society and for ourselves?
Youth and innovation will always go together. That's my sentence.
Wonderful. So please, I'm so excited that the networks that I showed you earlier on were able to join me in putting this together. I'm really happy that Carol was able to share some things from the Smithsonian. And thank you to all of our students, early career folks, for your wonderful insights. I'm sure, I know we have to clear the room because there's another session, but we can